Okay, exception handling. So there are several options in terms of creating exception and sending corresponding response status to the client. Option number one, you can explicitly set the status code yourself. Option number two is that you can actually use a built-in exception class called the WebApplicationException class, and you provide the status code with it. And then option number three, there are subclasses of web application exception class, and the JAX-RS has several exception classes, so you can actually use these exception classes. And option number four is you are going to be able to create you're going to actually use what is called the exception mapping scheme. So let's take a look at each of these in a bit more detail. Before we move on, the response code. So HTTP response code in several categories. 200 range means it's a success. 300 range means it's a redirection of some sort. And 400 means it's a client error. And 500 range means it's a server error. So 200 success range is basically the one that the typical response we see is 200 OK when you perform get operation, right? When you perform post operation for creating a new item, as we learned in the previous presentation, the status code should be 201, okay, which means created. Okay, and you can go to this website to see all the response code. So option number one, so you can set response status manually. So in this case, this is a get operation, and we try to find that item, based on the item that was actually passed from the client. And if there is no item, I should actually say item not equal, item equal null rather than user. And then basically what we are going to see is that we are going to call the status method of the response object, and then we specify in this case 44. Okay, this is a constant value of 44. And you can also set the response body. Maybe you can say could not find a user with the response ID, and then when you call build, it will return response object, and that's what you're going to return. Okay. Otherwise, it's going to be returning the correct user or item content. Okay. So the built-in, so that's actually option number one. It's pretty straightforward. Now let's see how you can use a built-in exception classes. So there are several built-in exception classes in JAX-RS, and one is a web application exception class. Okay. So if item is not available, then you can throw web application exception object, and here you can set the actual status code. So here we are setting 44 when you're creating web application exception object. So when you throw it, it will generate response code 44 to the client. Okay, so that's option number two. Option number three is that you can actually use more detailed, more specific exception classes. Okay, so bad request exception, that is basically 400, malformed message. Not authorized exception and forbidden exception, these are related to security. So when a user is trying to access a secured resource, the server will actually respond back with 401. Authentication failure, and then user will send the authentication credentials, and then once the user is authenticated, user will try to access the resources. Even though user is authenticated, if user is trying to access that he or she is not privileged with, he's not entitled, then the server will still return 43. So we're gonna actually play around with the security things later on in the security presentation. Not found exception is 44. Not allowed exception is 45. In this case, HTTP method not supported. We know 46 and 415, right? Not acceptable exception and not supported exception. So not 46 is that client media type request is not supported, meaning client set the accept header with a particular representation, but server doesn't support it. 415 is not supported exception, so client posted media type not supported. So client, maybe as part of the post request, client sends some data in XML, but if there is no method that can handle, that can consume that XML, then server application will return 415. 500 is general server error, and 503 is server is temporarily unavailable or busy. Okay, so you can use this specific exception object in your application. So this is an example. So here I'm just using not found exception object. Okay, and then you can actually see the contents that could be set the response body. So that not found exception is one of the child classes, by the way, web application exception. Okay, so let's do exercise 1, 2, 3. So let's take a look at the lab documentation. Looks like I have not unzipped the exception. Okay, so let's unzip JAX-RS, unzip, and let's run. Let's read the lab documentation here, exception here. And we're gonna do exercise 1, 2, 3. So first one is actually setting exception explicitly. So that is okay. So let's actually import the project. Import existing Maven project, and I'm gonna go to the labs and the exception. Okay, all right. So the first one is, we're gonna actually set the response with the 4.4 explicitly. So when I run the application, and it will give me two link. One is a valid URL, and the other one is the invalid URL. Okay. And when we click the invalid URL, we want to actually see how response 4.4 is actually being returned. Okay. So the first user, you have two users, so this one should work fine, right? But if I click 10, there is no user whose ID is 10. So in this case, could not find user 10. So if you take a look at the code here, basically we are setting user resource here, and so here when the user is not available, we are basically setting the state. We actually call the status, and this is basically 4.4. Okay, so it is a constant value of 4.4. Okay. So that's an example where we are setting the status, and this is the contents that we are setting the response body. So that's the reason you are seeing I could not find user 10, resource ID 10. Okay, that is the an example where we are setting the status code directly using status method of response object. And then the web application exception case. So this one actually works the same. So let's actually run this guy and finish. Actually, before we do that, I want to actually explain the homework. So the homework is that for your own exercise, I want you to study the response status. You can certainly take a look at the response. If you take a look at the Java documentation response, and you should be able to see a bunch of let's see. Yeah, so status. So if you take a look at the status. Okay, so that was the case. Yeah. So if you go to status, and then you're going to actually see a bunch of the status code. Okay, so these are all constant values. Now, what I want you to do in the 4.4 case, add a placeholder method that puts the put method, and then return a response status method not allowed response, and then use a call command to try that out. So here I'm actually trying to use a put command, and then on this 10 XML, and should actually return the not allowed is actually, I think it's 415, not 415. Yeah, I think maybe 415. Yeah, so basically let me actually demonstrate here. So I want to actually have basically put method, and then we are going to have path. Yeah, so we're going to actually, yeah, so I'm going to just copy this code and then just have it with the put. Okay, so I'm going to put, and then here I'm going to use the different method name, whatever method name I want, and basically I want to just return here, and so here basically I want to set here with method not allowed. Okay, so method not allowed. Okay, so and then for entity I'm gonna say method put method not allowed, something like this. Okay, not allowed. All right, so we have this method, and when this method is actually being invoked, we just want to actually return this method not allowed status. Okay, so now we're gonna actually use this call command. Okay, so I'm gonna copy this guy, and let's go with here. Let me just clear. And then yeah, so we see method put method not allowed. Okay, so that is actually exercise I want you to do. Okay, now we are actually doing the what is the web application exception. It works pretty much the same way, right? Yeah, so if I run the application, and let's run it again, and again it will have the same UI, and if I click the user number 10, it will have not found exception, right? And in this case the code is we are using web application exception. All right, and so we are basically creating a web application exception object, and we just return. Okay, again, for your own exercise, I want you to actually simulate the same thing. So again, let me just call this guy and 4 that's what's expected, right? I want you to actually do the same thing for another, creating the method, and again do handle this method not allowed response. Okay, and the last one is not found exception. So here if you take, it should actually behave exactly the same, but if you take a look at the code here, we are now using not found exception. Okay, again, your exercise is to simulate the not allowed exception. So not allowed exception is one of the exception classes that is available in JAX-RS. So when user is sending put request, we want to actually send back the not allowed exception object. Okay, so I'm gonna give you guys about the 12 or 13 minutes to do exercise 1, 3, and 3. 1, 2, 3.